You're not supposed to hear your own code name after 30 years of silence, but when the voice came through the static, it whispered one word: Yellowbird. Colonel Marion Tate had buried that name along with the nightmares it carried. But when a tourist went missing deep in the same jungle she once barely escaped, Marion knew this wasn't coincidence. It was unfinished business clawing its way back. Welcome to Echo Stories, where forgotten missions, unsung heroes, and buried truths come back to life. If stories of sacrifice, secrecy, and redemption speak to you, subscribe now and uncover new stories every day. Colonel Marion Tate hadn't been called Yellowbird in 3 decades. That code name had been retired, like the medals she'd locked away in a drawer and the uniform she hadn't worn since 1992. But when her old shortwave radio crackled to life in the middle of a foggy Virginia night, it didn't speak in riddles. It gave her coordinates, a name, and a message only she would understand. Yellowbird, Sector 9. Lost civilian. Immediate threat confirmed. She stared at the rusted device, unsure if her mind was playing tricks or if someone out there still remembered how to reach her. Sector 9 wasn't just jungle. It was the place she had died and been reborn. The place her mission was sabotaged, her team left behind, and her survival made someone back in Langley very uncomfortable. She wasn't supposed to make it out, but she did. Now, someone was drawing her back in. Marion didn't hesitate. She moved like she had a lifetime ago, methodically, instinctively. She opened the storage trunk under her bed and pulled out her old field pack. The jungle boots were stiff but intact. The compass still spun true. At the bottom of the pack was the worn photograph of her original unit. All but 2 were dead, one of them by her hand. She didn't look back as she locked up the cabin. The birds were just beginning to sing as her plane lifted off. Her destination, Ecuador, the Yasuni rainforest, the last place she had bled, killed, and run for her life. In Quito, a man was waiting, mid-30s, clean-shaven, eyes like polished stone. "You're the American?" he asked. Marion nodded. "I'm the reason you're still breathing," he smirked. "They said you had a sense of humor." "No, they said I had unfinished business." The man's name was Luis. He handed her a satellite image and a hand-drawn map. Anna Keller, 24, wildlife photographer, vanished 5 days ago. Last GPS ping was here, Sector 9. Marion circled the spot with her thumb. "The same place." "You've been there?" "I barely got out." They set off in an old Land Cruiser. The jungle grew thicker, the roads narrower. Marion sat silently, scanning the canopy as if it still held secrets. Luis stole glances at her in the rearview mirror. "What was your role back then?" "Diversion." "For what?" "Something that didn't officially exist." They arrived at a makeshift base camp near a wide river. Marion examined the terrain with a soldier's eye. The ridgelines, the overgrowth, the soft spots in the soil, all of it felt too familiar. Ghosts hid in the trees here. And maybe more than ghosts. She unfolded the old map beside the new one. The lines hadn't changed, but the names had been erased. She tapped her finger on a small X marked in red. "This is where I was supposed to die." That night, Marion couldn't sleep. The jungle didn't allow it. Every rustle, every call of a distant animal brought memories back, ones she thought she'd buried. The ambush, the betrayal, the silence that followed. She rose before dawn and strapped on her gear. Luis met her by the fire. "You sure you're ready for this?" "I've never been ready, but I go anyway." As the sun rose, they plunged into the trees, swallowed by green. The trail was almost non-existent, but Marion moved like she had a blueprint in her bones. Every snapped twig, every disturbed root told her something. By midday, they found what she feared, a set of tracks, fresh, not just Anna's, boots, heavy ones. She knelt and touched the soil. "These aren't poachers, they're military." Luis frowned. "But we don't have anyone stationed here." "I know." They pushed deeper. Around every bend, the air grew thicker. The sun disappeared behind a choking canopy. And then, at the edge of a dried riverbed, they saw it. A rusted-out sign barely hanging from a post. The last letters read, Sector 9. Marion froze. Her breathing slowed. Her hand drifted to her sidearm. Luis whispered, "This is where she disappeared?" "No," Marion said. "This is where I disappeared." And that's when the gunshot rang out. Marion hit the ground hard, the bullet narrowly missing her shoulder. Luis dove behind a tree, pulling his sidearm with shaking hands. The jungle roared to life with silence, the kind that falls just before violence resumes. Marion's breath was steady. Her rifle was already in position. She scanned the tree line, the vines, the decaying remnants of forgotten buildings hidden beneath green. Then she saw him, a figure in full tactical gear, face obscured by a balaclava, holding an M4 carbine trained in their direction. But he wasn't firing. He was waiting, watching, testing them. Marion didn't wait. She squeezed off 2 shots. One hit the tree trunk inches from his head. The second clipped his shoulder. He vanished into the foliage like a ghost. Luis crawled up beside her. "Who the hell are these people?" he whispered. Marion's eyes narrowed. "They're not cartel, too clean, too disciplined. They're either mercs or leftovers." "Leftovers," she didn't answer. She was already moving. Every muscle, every tendon in her body was firing with precision built over decades. She followed the tracks through brush and ruin, ignoring the warnings her body screamed. Luis followed. They passed remnants of a forgotten world, cracked concrete bunkers, rusted fencing half swallowed by vines, a signpost in broken Spanish and English. One word remained clear: biohazard. They reached a small clearing where the jungle had been scorched away recently. A black scorch ring, like something had been burned clean. Marion dropped to one knee and brushed ash between her fingers. "This is where they took her," she said. "Extraction zone." Luis knelt beside her. "Then she's already gone." Maybe. Or they're still moving. Either way, we follow the trail. They hiked for another 2 hours, deeper into the unknown. Finally, at the crest of a ridge, Marion stopped short. Below them lay a hidden valley, unnaturally symmetrical, carved into the earth like a surgical scar. At the center stood a concrete facility, half swallowed by vegetation, its helipad cracked and overgrown, but unmistakably active. "Jesus," Luis breathed. "That's not on any map." It wouldn't be. Marion led them down the slope, cutting through brush until they reached the outer perimeter. A chain-link fence ringed the compound. Marion found a breach, cut clean recently. They slipped through. Inside, the compound was eerily quiet. Vines curled around satellite dishes. Security cameras still blinked red. Then they heard it, a voice. Weak. "Help!" They moved toward the sound and found a small concrete holding cell. Inside, slumped against the wall, was Anna Keller, eyes sunken, face bruised but alive. Luis rushed to her. "We got you," he said. Anna looked up at Marion. "They said you were dead." Marion smiled faintly. "I get that a lot." They lifted her carefully, but before they could move, alarms erupted, red lights flashed, a voice boomed over unseen speakers. "Unauthorized presence detected." Lockdown initiated. Luis cursed. "What now?" Marion scanned the hallway. "We find another way out. They'll come from the front. We go through the labs." They moved fast, weaving through corridors littered with dust-covered equipment and shattered glass. The labs looked long abandoned, but Marion knew better. A place like this was never truly dead. They reached a secure room marked GEN8. Inside, metal lockers lined the walls. Marion opened one. Inside were sealed files, a hard drive, and photos, grainy black and white images of bodies riddled with tumors, soldiers in containment suits, vials marked with skulls. Anna stared. "What the hell is this?" Marion's face was stone. "The reason they never wanted us to come back." She pocketed the hard drive and torched the rest with a flare from her pack. "We're not leaving a trace." Gunfire echoed down the hall. Luis took point. They fought their way through the compound, ducking, weaving, returning fire. Marion moved like death itself, calm, relentless. At last, they burst through a back gate and sprinted into the jungle. Behind them, the facility began to smoke. Marion tossed a second flare through the breached wall, igniting one of the remaining storage rooms. Flames danced between the trees. They didn't stop until they reached the river. A satellite phone buzzed in Marion's pocket. She handed it to Anna. "Call the embassy. Tell them you were lost. Nothing more." Anna nodded, trembling. Luis looked at Marion. "And us?" Marion gazed at the smoke rising in the distance. "We disappear, just like before." He nodded. "Same shadows, Same lies. She didn't argue. They boarded a rusted old riverboat that Luis had hidden under a tarp. As it pushed downstream, Anna looked back. Was it worth it? Marion didn't respond immediately. Then, softly, only if no one remembers it happened. Back in Virginia, the woods had barely changed. Marion's cabin stood just as she left it, nestled beneath the pines, its porch blanketed in leaves, its windows clouded with dust. To a stranger, it might have seemed abandoned, but to Marion, it was sanctuary. She stepped onto the porch like a soldier returning from deployment, her boots crunching softly over gravel and moss. But these weren't the same boots she'd worn into the jungle. Those were gone, buried beneath the hibiscus near the tree line. A private grave for a life she no longer wanted to carry. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and thyme. She didn't turn on the lights. She moved by memory, setting her duffel down by the old wood stove. The firewood was still stacked neatly, the coffee tin still half full. The silence wrapped around her like a blanket, thick, comforting, and unfamiliar. For years she had feared this silence. Now she welcomed it. In the days that followed, Marion kept her routine simple. She chopped wood in the mornings, walked the trails before dusk, and sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the fog roll in over the trees. But even in the stillness, pieces of the jungle lingered, sounds only she could hear, shadows that twitched just beyond reason. Sometimes she'd wake in the night to phantom screams or Breck's voice echoing in her chest like a heartbeat. But she didn't reach for the rifle. She just breathed, counted to 10, and waited for the quiet to return. Luis had offered to stay in contact, maybe even write up a false report for the agency. But Marion declined. She didn't want an epilogue. No summaries, no cleanup. She'd made her choices, burned the hard drive, destroyed the evidence, closed the door behind her. Yellowbird was finished. Anna Keller had returned to her life as a freelance documentarian. She posted no interviews, gave no statements, and declined all calls from government officials. A single image appeared on her personal page, a small yellow bird mid-flight, silhouetted against the jungle canopy. No tags, no caption. But Marion saw it. She smiled. Yellowbird had flown one last time, and this time, someone was watching. One afternoon, as Marion pruned the overgrown garden, a package arrived. No return address, no postage stamp, just a plain envelope tucked between the slats of her front door. Inside, a typewritten note. You were never expendable. Folded within the note was a medal, tarnished, unengraved, the Distinguished Intelligence Cross she was meant to receive posthumously 30 years ago. She ran her thumb over its surface. It felt cold, unfamiliar, like an apology sent too late. She placed it in a drawer beside her father's old watch and the compass from Nicaragua. She didn't need reminders anymore. But she didn't need to throw them away either. She started journaling, not about the mission, but about what came after. The sounds of birds she hadn't heard in years, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, the dreams when they came, and how they changed. Less fire, more faces. Breck smiling at her from across the fire pit. Luis, younger, laughing in the rain. Her father sitting at the old table with a deck of cards. Ghosts, all of them. But they no longer haunted her. They just visited. Every Thursday, she drove into town. Groceries, fuel, sometimes a newspaper. She avoided eye contact, wore a faded ball cap, but occasionally someone would recognize her. Weren't you in the service? They'd ask. She'd nod. Long time ago, they never asked for details, and she never offered any. That was the unspoken rule among certain veterans. You recognized the weight behind the eyes and let it be. Months passed, seasons changed, leaves fell and returned. One winter evening, as snow blanketed the cabin roof, Marion sat by the fire with a worn journal in her lap. She wrote down a sentence she hadn't dared to write before. I don't regret what I did. I only regret what I didn't do sooner. She closed the book, leaned back and listened to the fire crackle. Outside, an owl hooted once, then silence. That spring she built a bench at the edge of the garden. It faced the sunrise. Every morning she sat there with her coffee, watching the light stretch across the trees. She no longer waited for something to happen. She no longer feared peace. Some wars don't end with treaties. Some never even officially begin. They're fought in shadows, carried in silence, and buried in places no one dares to dig. But for those who survive them, the greatest act of defiance is to live anyway. Marion Hayes, codename Yellowbird, was no longer a ghost. She was a woman with calloused hands, a crooked back, and a past too heavy for words. But she was still here, breathing, watching the morning fog lift from the trees. And for the first time in her life, she didn't reach for the radio. She didn't have to. Thank you for watching Echo Stories. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of the silent strength many carry, we invite you to subscribe. We share untold tales of resilience, duty, and quiet courage, because some heroes never ask to be remembered, but they deserve to be.